I think I'm entitled.
You want answers!
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
I woke up this morning, got myself a gun. Mama always said I'd be the chosen one.
Rattling off statistics, saying things are getting better doesn't make you feel better. Especially when you've just heard about someone being slashed in the throat or thrown onto a subway tracks. There's a psychological impact. People worry they could be next. Anxiety takes hold. And riding the subway, which should just simply be part of your everyday life, is filled with stress and trepidation. And if you make a living as a transit worker, that is compounded exponentially, that level of stress. So I say this will not stand, not on my watch. So today, in the wake of these latest attacks, I'm unveiling a 5-point plan to rid our subways of people who commit crimes and to protect all New Yorkers, whether you're a commuter or a transit worker. Point 1. I'm redeploying nearly 1,000 members of the New York State Police, MTA Police, and MTA National Guard to conduct bag checks in the city's busiest transit stations.
That was the State of the Union address. That really was a State of the Union address. I don't care what you hear from Joe Biden tonight. That's New York Governor Hochul talking about just how bad things are in her state, specifically the city of New York, with crime, and illegals are associated with many of them. And she's now deciding I've got to activate members of the National Guard to join with state police to be patrolling our subways. That, my friend, is the state of our union. No, I know Joe Biden is just going to flourish everything. He's going to present bouquets of flowers and bring out water for everyone to drink. And since this is apparently a big ice cream day, he'll probably bring out ice cream. Who knows? But that, you just heard from Governor Hochul, is the true State of the Union address. And keep in mind, she's a Democrat. But she recognizes reality, something Joe Biden has lost touch with a long time ago. Thank you for joining us. This is the first of 2 hours of Larry Connors USA. Back to back for you here. We're here every Monday through Friday from 6 to 8 p.m. And reminding you, when we're on the air, we're also streaming video. You can watch. I'd love to have you watch, just like being back on TV for you. You can go to News Talk STL Facebook, News Talk STL Rumble, or Twitter, or even YouTube. Or you can go to Larry Connors USA, Facebook, Rumble, Twitter. And remember, anything you miss, video or audio, or you want to watch at a later time, listen at a later time, when it fits your schedule, please do so. They'll be posted as audio and video podcast at Larry Connors USA, Facebook, and LarryConnersUSA.com. And when you watch, please share with someone else. Share with them the State of the Union address that you just heard from New York Governor Hochul. I know we'll be watching, see what Biden says tonight, but those statements by her that is how bad it's gotten in New York City, that they got to put in state troopers on the railroad platforms and also National Guardsmen start checking bags. And she also talked about we're going to start putting cameras in each and every car. I'm surprised they hadn't done that already, but now it's reached a point they're going to have to. They're going to add cameras to the railway platforms. They may even be mixing in some undercover police in the midst of the crowd. You're not going to hear President Biden discuss how bad it's gotten in the nation's number one city. But the blame for how bad it's gotten falls directly on the Oval Office. So again, we're glad to have you listening. Please share with your friends. I'll remind you again, with George Soros and his group buying the Odyssey stations all across the nation, 200 plus stations. They will be making an effort to silence all conservative voices and turn them into propaganda machines for the left. Just like he took over district attorneys being basically elected and or appointed, depending upon the situation, and trying to take over various state governments in addition to city governments, and all of them wanting to declare to be a sanctuary city, and suddenly realizing that's not really working out too well, but he'll continue pushing it. So with that in mind, I will remind you that News Talk STL is number one for the most live and local conservative talk. And on this program, I try to give you a balance from both sides. I'll show you an example in a moment. But let's go back to Governor Hochul talking about if any of these people get on our subways, if they create any of these crimes, that they've had already a slashing of a throat or beat down of a woman, and their passengers are just holding onto their straps and just kind of watching. They're afraid to get involved. Remember the Marine who got involved? Put a chokehold on the guy, trying to subdue him? Wasn't trying to kill him, just trying to get control of him. Do you think she'll step forward now and say that guy should get a badge of honor, as opposed to being jailed and charged? Well, here's what she says will happen to violators going forward.
I'm proposing that we amend New York state laws in this session in a matter of weeks to allow courts to ban anyone from riding the subway or taking a bus who's convicted of a violent crime against another passenger. Now, there's already a similar law in the books intended to protect personnel from the MTA. But that law has many loopholes that we've identified, and indeed, it's only been used 3 times since it was first enacted in 2020. We're going to get to the bottom of that, find out what's missing, what language is required. So basically, if you assault someone on the subways, you won't be on the subways. And a judge will now have the power to make sure that for at least 3 years, they'll have the ability to keep you off the subways.
That's what it takes, another law stacked upon top of a law you already got. It's a crime to assault anyway, right? But again, back to a passenger that's on board trying to help save someone from assault. Are they going to be penalized like this Marine was when he grabbed a man, tried to hold him down, a man who obviously had a long list of warrants against him, and threatening the passengers on board? What's going to happen to a passenger who steps forward trying to stop an assault? Or are you going to continue to prosecute them? So tonight we have Joe Biden's third in-person State of the Union. Remember, one had to be done under the COVID laws, so there was no convening of Congress. It was a video type thing. That aside, Chris Matthews, an MSNBC analyst, says this is what Joe Biden is facing when he goes into the chambers tonight.
He's going to face the enemy. Clearly, we've watched Mitch McConnell, and we've watched Lindsey Graham, and watched Cruz, as you talked about it this morning. Everybody in that audience is maggot up, totally with MAGA. They're all in. They've all agreed to endorse Trump. They're going to be adamantly opposed to anything on the border. Anytime if the president takes any kind of shot at the Republicans for not supporting the deal that they originally were for at their leadership level, he's going to get attacked. It's going to be a brutal night for him. And of course, everybody's going to look and see how he's doing, what kind of vitality he shows. But these guys are in the tank with Trump all the way, and they're going to show it tonight. I think it's going to be like Adam Schiff's victory speech the other night in California. I mean, there's just going to be a lot of heckling. It's going to be very difficult for the president.
Well, that would just be too bad, won't it? But I will say this, and I do agree, House Speaker Mike Johnson has cautioned, admonished basically, Republicans attending tonight, don't heckle that much. Try to restrain it a bit. And I think that's a good idea. There will be times, but let's keep it somewhat under control. That's the view, of course, is seen by Chris Matthews, former MSNBC analyst, host of his own program. Now, another source that's talking about how bad it's going to be for Trump going in there is the editor-in-chief of The Hill. That's Bill Cusack. And he says this could well be Biden's speech of his life.
Well, this is the beginning of his case for a second term, and he's got to do a lot of things. The coalition that elected Biden in 2020 has been basically crumbling. He's got to shore up his base, which has been weakened. He's also lost independents, and that's the key. Both independents they're wary of both Trump and Biden. So this is a huge speech for Biden. He's got to show he's up for the job at his age. Obviously, there have been major questions about that, and he's got to talk about the economy and immigration. And I do think he's going to try to bait Republicans on immigration, and it's going to be tough for them to bite their tongue. But without a doubt, the pressure is on the president.
Yeah, it is on him. And to that extent, there's something he's going to do his best to kind of walk around and probably will not even bring the name forward because he just wants it to be forgotten. And shame on him for wanting to simply walk away and forget it. Fox News' Peter Doocy raised the question to KJP of the White House.
Yeah. Will President Biden publicly address Laken Riley's murder, allegedly at the hands of an illegal immigrant who was released by law enforcement multiple times on Thursday night? I know he's got a statement, but what about at the State of the Union?
Look, I do want, this is such a tragic story and obviously situation. This is someone's life that was lost, so I do want to always acknowledge and extend our deepest condolences to her family and to her friends and the people who loved her. And so want to always be sure to say that, and because it's so tragic. Look, I don't have anything to share about the president's speech as it relates to that particular question that you have.
And probably not even in it. Now, of course, normally a president would invite the family of such a victim of a crime, I should say, like this, to be in the audience sitting with the First Lady. They have a woman who will be sitting with the First Lady who had to leave her state to get an abortion. So they're going to make a big point out of that. But I will tell you this, that Georgia Congressman Mike Collins, of course, of the same state where Laken Riley was killed, Laken Hope Riley, did invite her parents to attend the State of the Union with him, but they said, we need to decline. We're still grieving the loss of our daughter. And that is fully understood. Congressman Chip Roy was questioning a witness regarding what is now being called the Laken Riley Act. Now, the Laken Riley Act, of course, is named after her. It would require Immigration and Customs Enforcement to issue detainers on any illegals charged with theft or burglary. And Representative Mike Collins bringing it forward, saying we hate to have things like this happen off a tragedy, but if we can learn from them and not make this mistake again, then we will do that. So he did introduce the Laken Riley Act to Congress. And to that point, Congressman Chip Roy of Texas said, you know, there's so many other names that could be put on that. And as he goes through trying to talk about a couple of cases, Chip Roy is a strong man in the sense that he does not show weakness, but his voice is almost breaking. Listen.
Elizabeth Medina, a 16-year-old high school student who was a part of the cheerleading team, was found dead in her bathtub in Edna, Texas, by her mother. Her mother found her 16-year-old daughter dead in a bathtub in their home. She was supposed to perform in a local Christmas parade with her cheer squad, but never showed up where her mother went looking for her. Can you imagine?
No, I can't.
The suspect, Rafael Romero, was charged with Elizabeth's murder, a 23-year-old illegal alien who was overstaying his visa for the past 5 years. Another person in the United States unlawfully, because of this administration's and the previous Democratic administration's failures to enforce the law.
Could have had numerous names other than Laken Riley on the act. Biden, of course, tonight will obviously look to deflect, distract, ignore best they can on any crimes committed by illegals. Of course, if it's committed on New York City subway now, maybe Governor Hochul will have something to say about it. But the other thing to keep in mind, The Biden camp is now preparing battle plans to attack Donald Trump.
It's the Biden-Harris campaign just releasing a memo laying out their new campaign strategy. It's clearly attacking Trump. That is number one on their list. Here is a quote from said letter. Donald Trump's primary performances are a major warning sign for the GOP and an opportunity for President Biden to expand his coalition. Trump heads into the general election unable to expand his support beyond the hardcore MAGA base. A significant share of moderate and Haley voters across the country are saying that Trump cannot count on their votes in a general election. Trump is greatly underperforming with the voters who will decide the election in November. Trump continues to lose moderates. So the strategy apparently is to say that Trump is not winning enough Republicans and enough of those anti-Trumpers are actually potentially going to vote for Biden.
And they might well do that. But again, I want to go back to the editor-in-chief of The Hill publication, Bill Cusack, who said, this is going to be a royal battle.
This is going to be a very nasty race, and we'll see if there's even a debate. Trump says he wants to debate Biden. Obviously, Trump didn't participate in any of the primary debates, and that was probably a good decision because he ended up winning big. So I do think that they're going to be trying to get in their heads over the next 8 months or so, and that could be tiresome for the American people. We shall see, but this is going to be, without a doubt, a very nasty mudslinging type of race.
And no doubt about that. And it's going to start fast and be furious. Lawrence O'Donnell of MSNBC is actually echoing things I've been telling you for some time now.
Obviously, there is nothing more important this year for the Democrats and democracy itself than winning the presidency. The next best thing, the next most important thing is the United States Senate. I, for one, don't believe Donald Trump is going to win the presidential election, but if you're one of the millions who is worried that he will, you should find ways to help elect Democrats to the United States Senate. The United States Senate should be campaign objective number 2, because if Democrats control the United States Senate, they can stop every single thing that Donald Trump tries to do legislatively.
And in fact, to that extent, that gets right down to the Senate in particular when it comes to nominations for federal judgeships, and any cabinet position has to go through the Senate for confirmation. I pointed this out to you before, and this time around there are 33 U.S. Senate seats up for regular election. 20 of those are held by Democrats, 10 by Republicans, and 3 held by Democrats who often side with the Democrats. You see how vital that is? You can't just win the White House. You can't just keep control of the House of Congress. You've got to expand that, and you've got to win the Senate. We'll get into that more in the next hour. And also in the next hour, a possible murder victim who is related to Senator Mitch McConnell. We have a guest on that story coming up in the next hour. But up next, I have a guest that we've had on before, but I might not be able to have her on ever again, because just having her on might make me a target of censorship. Yeah, like I care. Lock and load, ready on the right.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
Pigeons, they are everywhere, and they're very good at dive bombing freshly washed cars. Wellington Environmental reminds you those droppings are more than a nuisance. They can be a major health issue, especially massive droppings on buildings or in parking garages. So who do you call to safely clean it up? You do what many hospitals, universities, public buildings already do. You call Wellington Environmental. Wellington Environmental has been dealing with all kinds of hazards for 35 years. Special people, special skills, special equipment. Wellington gets it done. So to avoid health issues ranging from pigeon droppings to mold to chemical leaks, contact Wellington. 314-644-4930. 644-4930. WellingtonSTL.com. Wellington Environmental, your world cleaner, better, safer. Be well with Wellington.
Tim Jones and Chris Arps in the afternoon.
Horace, Americans individually have lost over $4,000 in income and over $7,000 where you have a household with both parents working.
It shouldn't be, it's the economy stupid. We should just say, stupid! It's the economy. Unbelievable the devastation that Americans are feeling.
Tim Jones and Chris Arps. Weekdays at 3:30 on News Talk STL.
What if everything you thought and believed to be true about owning and buying your home turned out to be wrong?
Straightforward, objective advice on the right way to make the most out of every dollar you put into your home.
We're the only country that has one of those. Most other countries, considering like Canada, the UK, they don't have long-term fixed-rate mortgages like that. They're all variable-rate mortgages.
HomeWise with Michael Midgett. Sunday mornings at 9 on News Talk STL.
Great news for my sponsor, Napoli Sea. And it's no surprise to me nor hundreds who have dined there. The first time I entered, it was clear Napoli Sea is unique. The decor, the fish, imaginative cocktails, and of course Napoli Sea is right next door to Napoli 3 in St. Charles. Napoli 2 is in Town and Country. The original Cafe Napoli is in Clayton, and I'm honored to endorse each of them. Visit any of the Cafe Napolis.
This is News Talk STL.
I am flesh and I am bone. Rise up, ting, ting, like glitter and gold. I got fire in my soul. Rise up, ting, ting, like glitter. Like glitter and gold. Like glitter. Do you walk in the valley of kings?
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Welcome back. Now, I don't know if what I said right before we went to break, that we've already been intercepted and not going to be allowed to talk to our guest. We're still working on it. Let me explain something. In preparing for this program, and some of you asked and have even mentioned, said, listen, the material you deliver to us, stats, information, sources, you must spend a lot of time preparing. Well, we do, because we want to give you the very best program we can each and every day. There are days I walk out here and think, man, that was a home run. There are other days, well, we got a good double, but we didn't get a home run. We never strike out. But this guest we've had on numerous times before, and there's an article she wrote. She is the executive editor of The Federalist, Joy Pullman. Joy, we've established communications. We have not been censored. Glad to have you on board.
Thanks for having me.
I'd mentioned when we went to the break, I said, after I have you on here today, I may never be able to have you again, and that's because your piece points out AI censorship will target me or anyone who want to read primary sources to fact-check the news, which is pretty much what the Federalist does. And the Federalist, apparently, you've raised a red flag. You guys, I don't know, are you carrying around a hammer and sickle? What's going on?
Oh, I mean, the problem is that we're opposing the hammer and sickle, and that's what gets you put on blacklist in this country now.
Yeah, you're right. Go ahead.
But,
How does this tie into what they're trying to do with AI to track people that are trying to read what you've got?
Well, federal documents, and investigations, and the House Subcommittee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government released documents from their investigation showing that, my tax dollars have developed automatic censorship tools using artificial intelligence. So what that means, for example, is say that the recording of this radio, conversation that we're having, if it goes online,
it never happened, Joy. Joy, this never happened. But go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, it will be like it didn't happen.
Yeah,
right? When AI is locking it down, right? So if someone posted on their Twitter, their Facebook, even there's talk about emails, deciding not to send their things. Elon Musk, was talking about how he got a new Microsoft computer, and the license agreement says that Microsoft owns the things that you write on their computers, and they reserve the right to shut down computers of people who type quote unquote hate speech, which is just a proxy for supporting the Constitution and Christianity.
Yeah.
In this, So if you have, those AI will basically listen to, and they're looking for code words that you and I are using in this conversation. And if those code words are present, if we're using unfavored speech, then anyone who shares this, their link will not get shared with the same way that it would have if it was, say, a New York Times podcast, whatever the case is. So there's been, we probably your audience is aware of the fact that human censors, for example, like during the 2020 election, were working with federal funds to flag Facebook posts and memes and other sort of things that the censors found on. But what AI allows is it takes the humans out of the equation and makes it so much faster. You don't have the delay of it gets to spread for a couple hours. The AI can get to it quicker, more automatically, and censor many, many more pieces of content than teams of humans can.
And they're using something called NewsGuard that is putting AI into this NewsGuard operation that will immediately grab those words and send alerts.
Yeah. So there are many, many different, basically, I hesitate to call them companies because they're government funded, right? So basically, this is how the federal government is doing an end run around the Constitution. Instead of them directly censoring Americans, which is flatly unconstitutional, they just basically set up these companies and pay for the technology these companies make so that the companies will do it, for the federal government, what they're constitutionally prohibited from doing. So NewsGuard, got a bunch of money from you and me, taxpayers. And what it does is basically goes around and creates, ratings for news sites, even bloggers. And it uses those news sites basically to take away ad revenue and eyeballs, from people who say things that the government doesn't like.
Well, earlier, and my audience is going to get a chance to hear some of it in the second hour, I actually spend time listening to the other side as well. Lawrence O'Donnell, as you well know, MSNBC, he is saying if Trump's elected and we also lose the Senate, then everybody he wants to be a judge can be a judge, and they will begin to censor and control your rights, your constitutional rights. They keep preaching like they're the defenders of our Constitution when they only use that word when it fits their needs.
Well, I actually see, whenever someone on the left says something nowadays, that for me is actually a flag that they're doing the thing that they're saying their opponents are.
Right.
So that's how I kind of know, I can tell what they're doing is when they claim that people on the right are doing something. Because, people on the right are seeking the enshrinement of the Constitution, which, by the way, people on the left now claim the Constitution is racist hate speech, right? So, the document that created this country and continues to protect our freedoms, they have smeared that as something they need to get rid of for totalitarian government. So, so the people on the right, though, we want our First Amendment freedoms. We want all people to be able to speak freely, even if they say things that other people don't like. That's a viewpoint as old as this country, and the people on the right are the ones who have upheld that this whole time. What has changed is the people on the left. They're the ones who, use free speech and the institutions of our country to gain power. And then once they got in power, they're basically rolling up all those freedoms that gave them the ability to get into power. And they're taking all those freedoms and powers away from everybody else to keep it for themselves.
You're listening to Joy Pullman, executive editor of the Federalist. Blah, 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 Joy, because I see, according to NewsGuard, the Federalist is at a maximum risk for violating our Constitution.
Well, the very the NewsGuard claims, that the Federalist, says things that the federal government doesn't like, which is true, right? We're a news institution. Our job is to find out the truth.
Come on.
Our job is to find out the truth, not basically amplify government propaganda. So yes, that does make the people in power upset because voters very often do not like what the government does with their resources, with their money, with their institutions. And so as a news or agency, when, we tell people what's happening with public institutions with their own money, the government doesn't like it because they then have to face some accountability from the voters, a minuscule amount of it, I might add. But I would like to point out that the Federalist, by the way, has gotten major misinformation, disinformation, propaganda stories right, that outlets, that entities like NewsGuard rate way higher than us were, basically part of creating. If you look at the Spygate hoax, New York Times, Washington Post, Yahoo News, they were prime people who created that major hoax that led to the impeachment of a president on false pretenses using opposition research created by Democrats. The Federalist got that story completely right, and it was, major. It's not only a major story for 2 years of news cycles, but it also is huge, fundamental, shift in how Americans understand what their government is becoming. And that's just one of them. The operation to smear Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh as a serial rapist based on completely uncorroborated and contradicted by fact, claims by a lady of 30 years ago who has very poor memory. Immediately, the Federalist was on that, looking for where's the confirmations, where are the facts, where's the evidence for this, and there was none. But all the other, the competing organizations that NewsGuard works to, make sure that people hear from, they perpetuated those lies, while the Federalist didn't. We have a far better track record of accuracy than all of those institutions. But instead, NewsGuard is propping up the liars, the misinformation promoters, the propaganda spreaders, while claiming the Federalist does that.
Joy, give them a break. I mean, the New York Times finally admitted the laptop was Hunter's a year and a half after. I mean, come on, they get around it.
After the damage was done.
Right now,
After
I wonder what the response. Yeah, I wonder what the response is going to be when I tell the folks that the pace of the FBI arrest. This is according to Epic Times now. The pace of the FBI arrest and the opening of new January 6 cases are quickening. In the last 2 months, 93 more people have been arrested and charged by the Department of Justice because. Why? Well, it might be a good, opportune time with the election coming to, hey, remember January 6th.
You know what? I think it's very telling that the director of the FBI refused to answer Senator Cruz's question on the record of whether the FBI had planted sources who were involved in criminal provocation and wrongdoing at the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Still no disclosures from the FBI on its potential involvement there, and refusal to answer Congress, which allegedly is supposed to be in control of the FBI. It's supposed to be the oversight agency, but the overseers are kept in the dark, they're lied to, and they're manipulated by the very agencies they continue to fund.
I look at your piece and you quote the MIT grant application where it said, because interviewees distrusted both journalists and academics, they drew on the practice of reading primary sources to fact-check how the media outlets were reporting the news. As if they were going to a real primary source, they would get that. But if they're going to one of these fake, that they'd lost the meaning and the word ethics in journalism, they're still being lost.
Right. So the federal dollars went to this group of researchers at MIT who basically are studying how to manipulate and crush the dissent of people on the right. And so as part of that study, they noted that people on the right, conservatives like you and me, we are way more likely to not trust the narrative fed by self-proclaimed experts. And instead of just taking their word blindly and doing whatever they say, we check it according to primary sources and according to independent corroboration. And this is something that actually is evidence of higher thinking of
it's standard journalism. It's standard journalism to begin with.
It should be standard journalism, but it is not anymore. Right. It's basic smart person ways of determining what is true. But these researchers want to make people like us less likely to do that so that we are more susceptible to their lies.
Joy, I have enjoyed the interview, but I may have to go back and edit. Every time you say us and we, I kind of get a little shaky at this end, so it may just be you in the interview before it's over with.
Well, that's fine with me. I was generously putting you on my side, but a disagreement is okay with me.
No, I'm going to promote it heavily. Joy Pullman, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, too.
You bet. Joy Pullman with The Federalist. Excellent piece. You can look it up right now at The Federalist. Coming up, John Kerry dealing with China. Oh, wait for this one.
You can connect with Larry on Twitter at LarryConnersUSA.
I got an email which brought a smile. A woman named Mary wrote me, "We are purchasing a new roof from John Beal based on your recommendation." I thanked her then. I do it again now. Mary, I only endorse clients I believe in, and I've been a spokesman for John Beal for 10 years. It's all about trust. So if, like Mary, you need John Beal, trust me. Call 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF.
The United States Deputy Sheriff's Association is a national nonprofit and the largest non-governmental provider of services to law enforcement. The USDSA assists city, county, state, and federal agencies with free safety equipment donations and officer survival training, along with cash donations to families of law enforcement officers who perished in the line of duty, a citizen awareness program, and more. For more information on United States Deputy Sheriff's Association, please visit usdeputy.org.
I like supporting local companies that give back to the community. For more than 40 years, Vincent's Jewelers has helped raise more than $1.5 million for local charities. So I'm personally asking that when you're shopping for jewelry, give Vincent's a chance. And in turn, Vincent's will give even more to our community. On Olive, just east of 270. New specials every day on Vincent'sJewelers.com or Vincent's Facebook.
News, analysis, opinion.
USA, USA! That's a big game, man!
President Xi's really losing control.
People in China didn't ask me about people mowing each other down in a mall.
This is News Talk STL.
It is their responsibility.
He is a metastasizing agent.
We're all keeping a close eye on this.
Illegal immigration's crazy right now.
The United States is not being overrun.
News Talk STL.
It is a crisis at the border without question.
And NewsTalkSTL.com.
McGuire Moving will come to your home or office and give you a free, honest appraisal. Not over the phone. That way you won't be shocked come moving day. Really tight budget? McGuire will offer advice that could save you even more money. McGuire, fully licensed and insured, also has climate-controlled storage for you. McGuireMoving.com. It's that simple. Just remember, you're moving, anything, anytime, McGuireMoving.com.
This is News Talk STL.
This is Larry Connors USA.
Larry Connors USA.
Well, I got to tell you, we mentioned in the beginning that they are quickly rushing out now that it's clearly going to be Donald Trump, that Nikki Haley is not going to be in the race. It never really was, but they were trying to keep their powder dry to deal just with Trump. And now it's down to Trump and Biden, and everything is being unleashed. Wait till you hear some of the quotes I'm going to share with you here in a moment. But I want to go back to something I was raising in that interview with Joy Pullman, the executive editor of The Federalist. And I did refer to the source, Epoch Times. It's also being reported elsewhere. But I always try to give you the source so you can check it out yourself, and you can verify if what I'm saying is right or raise questions. Listen, I never encourage anyone to simply follow me blindly. You should never do that with anyone. There's only one person that's walked this earth that was sinless. That would be Jesus. The rest of us were all sinners. But I'm looking at a piece written in the Epoch Times by Joseph Hanneman. And he points out, after a pause, January 6 arrests are now sharply increasing. The FBI is making arrests. The DOJ is filing charges at the quickest pace in 3 years, pushing the expected total up to 2,150 arrests by 2026. Yeah, they've got plans down the road still. They're talking about the pace of the arrests and the opening of the new January 6 criminal cases, quickening so much in late 2023 and now earlier this year that the District of Columbia federal courts could bend under the weight. In the past 2 months, since we began this year, 93 have been arrested and charged, according to DOJ. 93. At this rate, some 445 new cases could hit the docket in 2024, more than they saw in 2022 and 2023. Why? Why now? It's election year. And he points out in his article, up to March 6th, at least 1,358 have been arrested by the FBI and criminally charged for crimes related to January 6th. And when we say crimes related to January 6th, that is a very, very wide range. Of course, they'll make it whatever they want. And if you think under the Constitution you're entitled to a speedy trial, a lot of them have yet to get a speedy trial. Others have been rushed through, and based upon that, there's the other thing that you should keep in mind. They have a perfect conviction rate. Wow, a perfect conviction rate. They're looking at the stats from the E. Barrett Perryman U.S. Courthouse in D.C. Every one of the more than 100 January 6 defendants who chose a jury trial was found guilty of at least some of the charges. That's a perfect 100% conviction rate for federal prosecutors, a statistic cited repeatedly, and we need a change of venue motion. Get us out of D.C., a D.C. court and jury and judge where we can really get a true and fair trial. 100% of those motions have been denied. Again, looking at some of these charges and why they're doing it now, one of those representing them said, we had the pause and now we're getting these cases pushed forward. And he points out the 5-year statute of limitations. You don't need to arrest everybody and prosecute them in the first 18 months. They did that, and there was a pause. There's a period of time, according to this one prosecutor or the defense attorney, where there weren't arrests of any significant number happening. But now it's ramping up again. The top arrest states, citizens of where they lived when they got arrested. Florida, 129 from Florida, 104 from Texas, 93 from Pennsylvania, 90 dared be coming from California that got arrested for January 6th, 80 out of New York, 71 out of Ohio, 67 out of Virginia, and together they comprise, the ones I just gave you, 50% of all January 6th defendants. And 63% of those cases they've had in front of them already have been adjudicated. Defendants sentenced, 58% got jail or prison time, 19% got home detention, another 3.5% received a combination. Of the 769 who pled guilty to whatever charges they were facing, 69% were for misdemeanors, 31% for felonies. So 1,276 defendants charged with entering and remaining in a restricted building or grounds, 486 charged with assaulting, resisting, impeding officers. Now, again, if they're actually battling the police officers on the line, I'm not in favor of defending you to that extent. You should have stood down. But again, I don't know all the circumstances. I don't know if the barricade of shielded officers weren't pushing people up against the wall. We have had reports of where they're trying to get a woman up off the floor before she gets trampled on, and the officers just keep coming. And keep in mind, word was sent out from the White House to Nancy Pelosi. If you need additional troops, you need National Guard, we'll send them in if you're worried about anything. They didn't want them. And, of course, they want to tell you all the time about how many died that day, as if they were killed because of insurrection. There was only one death contributed directly, and that would be the woman who was crawling through the window into the chamber with a backpack on. She had served our nation honorably as a member of the Air Force, but at that point, going through a broken window into a chamber when the security guard did not know what she had in her backpack. I know this upsets a lot of you when I say it, but I'm not changing my tune just because you might get upset. Look at it this way. You're in your house, and somebody's coming through the window in your house, and you already shouted at them repeatedly, get out, stay back. They've come over your fence. They don't care about your dogs. They're going to coming through. You can see their hands, but they're carrying a backpack. You don't know what's in that. Are you going to let them come into your house without shooting them? And in this case, you got members of Congress inside. Again, I regret her death, obviously. And I don't like the fact they later promoted the guy and gave him some kind of award. That was over the top. but many of these are hit with the, quote, corruptly obstructing, influencing, or impeding an official proceeding. All because of counting electoral votes. Well, the Democrats already indicated they're going to be doing the same thing this time. Do you think we'll have people being arrested like they were years after? Because that's what's happening now. All right, I mentioned going to the break also about John Kerry. He is resigning as energy czar. Behind that resignation is another story that is related to China when we continue.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
You want to give someone something which they will really enjoy? Give them a Cafe Napoli gift card. You pick the amount, and they pick which of the Cafe Napolis they want to visit. Cafe Napoli in Clayton, Cafe Napoli in Town and Country, Napoli 3 on the streets of St. Charles, or right next door, Napoli C. The Napoli gift card. It's the perfect gift for anyone or your entire office. Cafe Napoli. Cafe Napoli.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
China has about 360 gigawatts of coal-fired power that is slated to come online or be built. And that would be catastrophic if that's what happens. But China is, I think, to some degree, hedging against the reality of what their economy needs as a backstop. But they're constructing and deploying more renewables than all of the rest of the world put together.
Do you think the coal plants are a just-in-case break glass in case of emergency that might never be used?
That's what they say to us, and that's what begins to be a possibility as you look at the massive amount of renewable that's being deployed.
That is John Kerry on a PBS program. The question asked by Al Shapiro. Well, do you think they're just building these plants just in case of an emergency? Well, that's what they're telling us. And yeah, I guess that's probably true. So we're going to buy that story. Are you kidding me? This is John Kerry, the U.S. Special Envoy on Climate, now stepping down in the coming weeks because he says, I think I can be used better elsewhere. You know why? You see this? Those who will be watching, you see this? There's another way I could have indicated it. He just talked about how China, or the host said, they're building more coal-fired power plants than we thought. Do you think they're just going to keep their promises that they will actually use them only if they really need them? And yeah, we believe that's what they told us. Are you an idiot, John? Well, that was a wasted question in my breath. He flies around in a jet. He says it's not mine. It belongs to my wife. I married into a big rich, Hunt ketchup. I did. Heinz ketchup, I should say. But here he is, and he wants to believe the Chinese. Point blank. So he's going to leave this job that he was appointed to by Joe Biden. And he's not just jumping ship because Biden might be gone, but because he sniffs there's something in the air that might be there for him. So when Kerry says, China has said that they're only doing it just in case, but here's what I think I should do.
Secretary Kerry, when you hear those words coming from the head of the largest publicly traded oil company, blaming the public for a lack of climate progress, how do you conclude that corporate America is marching alongside you?
Well, I haven't suggested that everybody is. I've said to you that there are many corporations that are doing unbelievable things right now.
But ExxonMobil's a pretty big one.
ExxonMobil is an oil and gas producer that has not yet joined in some of the larger initiatives that we need in order to achieve our goal. And ExxonMobil did step up in Dubai, but we need them to do more. Yes, we do. And that's one of the reasons why I'm transitioning out of this particular job, because I think that now the private sector is going to be the key to our ability to be able to win this battle.
So you're giving up the job title, but you're not giving up the fight.
Correct. I'm going to be directly involved in trying to help deploy the financing, which will accelerate this transition. All the finance reports say If you want to achieve net zero 2050, then it's going to cost about $2.5 to $4.5 trillion a year for the next 30 years. No government in the world has that money to put on the table, but the private sector does.
And I'm going to get my finger into that pie. That's what he's doing. As he said in his own words in that PBS interview, if you want to achieve net zero by 2050, it's going to cost $2.5, $4.5, $5 trillion a year. No government in the world can do it, but the private sector does. So maybe I'll work with the private sector and I'll help put deals together. And you know, there's a little vig off of those deals he will put together. Now, John Kerry isn't so stupid. He's shrewd is really the word. He's leaving the government. He's not making that much money doing this energy czar nonsense for Joe Biden. Got a big, lavish expenditure account, but no money in his pocket. And working with the Chinese, we see right now the problems that Biden is facing through his son and those connections. But Joe Biden is the president. John Kerry ran for it, didn't get it, thank God. But, of course, he's the right-hand man to Joe Biden on energy. And now he said, I'm going to step away from that. I'm going to go out and I'm going to be in the private sector, and I'm going to help facilitate that $2.5 to $5 trillion. You don't do that without a little something in return, right? Of course not. In the meantime, the left is already, they're setting their hair on fire because they know Biden is looking so bad in the polls. Let me share with you some examples from the progressive left state-controlled media. Rachel Maddow says, the only way the country gets saved is if Donald Trump loses. I don't want to be saved by Rachel Maddow and her crew, believe me. MSNBC's Wallace, the son of Mike Wallace, says if Trump is elected, America will be a threat to the world order. You see how they're throwing these dangerous names and so forth around in advance? They're trying to create that narrative, and it will go into their echo chamber, and those who watch and listen only to those operations, and especially after George Soros gets control of 200-plus stations held by Odyssey, they will be more than glad to just repeat it. You will never hear a dissenting word. That's why you need to count on this program and this station. And then we have the editorial board of the New York Times. Said the fact that the former president is poised to reclaim the Republican nomination is a tragedy. A tragedy. That's the way they list it. They say with his victories on Tuesday, so close to securing the 1,215 delegates, the rest is formality. He will almost certainly be the standard bearer for a third time. This is a tragedy for the Republican Party and for the country it purports to serve. Trump has demonstrated a contempt for the Constitution and the rule of law that makes him unfit to hold office. Hillary Clinton has done the same thing. She said that Second Amendment thing when she was running against Trump, that Second Amendment thing, that's not really everything what the Constitution says about it. You can't believe it exactly. Really? It's in the Constitution. And then when she loses because of the electoral vote, well, we just need to get rid of the Electoral College. Now, you tell me which one is supporting the Constitution and our nation and our values and which are not. Yeah, you don't have to spend a lot of time on that one, do you? It will be a tragedy, they say, if Trump is elected. Well, I hate to be partying and celebrating with such a, quote, tragedy. Coming up, a death tied to a relative of Mitch McConnell. Remember our pledge, one nation under God.
You can hear podcasts of this program at Larry Connors USA Facebook. Larry Connors USA Facebook.
St. Patty's Day will be a fine day for you to check out Lit Cigar Lounge in Dogtown, Shore and Begora. Wear your green and get some premium cigars at the Lit Lounge in Dogtown. Now, later in March, Lit Cigar Lounge will have a special tasting of Angel's Envy. Plus, get a bottle or several engraved, your name or company name. Just another reason Lit won Best Cigar Lounge 2 years in a row. Lit Cigar Lounge in Chesterfield. Lit STL Facebook.
News, analysis, opinion.
USA, USA. That's a big game, man.
President Xi is really losing control.
People in China didn't ask me about people mowing each other down in a mall.
This is News Talk STL.
It is their responsibility.
Hate is a metastasizing agent.
We're all keeping a close eye on this.
Illegal immigration is crazy right now. This United States is not being overrun.
News Talk STL.
It is a crisis at the border without question.
At newstalkstl.com. Talk radio made in St. Louis.
Very excited for what you guys are doing for the St. Louis community.
For St. Louis.
Relevant local talk.
Saying what we are thinking.
This is News Talk STL.
You guys are awesome. I love you. And it's a tremendous honor to be on the station.
News, analysis, and opinion.
Thanks for us covering the local angle.
People, this is America.
We better open our eyes.
Really local, really good.
News Talk STL at 1019, 94.1 and newstalkstl.com.
Are you thinking about buying medicine online? A search for online pharmacies yields more than 20 million results. But which ones can you trust? Medicines bought from unlicensed online pharmacies can be dangerous. You may get a fake drug, your condition may get worse, or you may experience a bad reaction. Don't put your health at risk. To learn how to find an online pharmacy that's safe and legal, visit fda.gov/BeSafeRx. A message from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration.
Tony Colombo here, reminding you to join us for the Bluff City Outdoors radio show and podcast, where we talk fishing, hunting, camping, and everything else involving the great outdoors. Brought to you by Bluff City Outdoors in Alton. The Bluff City Outdoors Show, Saturdays at 11 a.m. right here on News Talk STL.
No matter how large or small your digging project may be, no matter how urban or rural, you must always call 811 before any digging project. 811 is our national one-call number, alerting your local utility companies to come out and mark any lines they have near your dig site. So before you do this or this, make sure you do this. For digging projects big or small, make the call to 811. Brought to you by Common Ground Alliance.
Hey, it's Katie, reminding you to subscribe to our show podcast so you never miss anything that happens here at News Talk STL. Get our podcasts every day on the show pages at newstalkstl.com, or just subscribe to your favorite shows on Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon, or anywhere else you get your podcasts.
I drive my bus in a busy city. That's why road safety is so important to me. I know that I must slow down and be extra careful when I make a wide turn. Buses need more room than cars. Everyone can help keep our roads safe. Next time you're driving, remember to give buses plenty of time and space to finish turning before driving ahead. Let's all plan to share the road safely. Learn how at www.sharetheroadsafely.gov.
So many ways to listen to News Talk STL.
Come join the conversation. All you have to do is say,
Hey Alexa, play News Talk STL.
Welcome to News Talk STL, conservative talk radio for St. Louis.
What if everything you thought and believed to be true about owning and buying your home turned out to be wrong?
Straightforward, objective advice on the right way to make the most out of every dollar you put into your home.
We're the only country that has one of those. Most other countries, considering like Canada, the UK, they don't have long-term fixed-rate mortgages like that. They're all variable rate mortgages.
HomeWise with Michael Midget, Sunday mornings at 9 on News Talk STL. If you find yourself feeling out of place in the world, it's comforting to know conservative values haven't been abandoned everywhere.
The far left wants to destroy conservative values in America.
This is News Talk STL. Welcome home.
Hey, it's Nick Schroer. To preserve this nation, to preserve the experiment in liberty that our founders envisioned, we must take a stand and fight. Join me Sunday nights at 8 p.m. only on News Talk STL.
Stand and fight with Nick Schroer. Brought to you by Missouri Wild Alchemy at MissouriWild.com. This is News Talk STL.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
I woke up this morning, got myself a gun.
beginning of his case for a second term, and he's got to do a lot of things. The coalition that elected Biden in 2020 has been basically crumbling. He's got to shore up his base, which has been weakened. He's also lost independents, and that's the key. Both independents they're wary of both Trump and Biden. So this is a huge speech for Biden. He's got to show he's up for the job at his age. Obviously, there have been major questions about that, and he's got to talk about the economy and immigration. And I do think he's going to try to bait Republicans on immigration, and it's going to be tough for them to bite their tongue. But without a doubt, the pressure is on the president.
Yeah, the pressure is on the president. And Speaker Mike Johnson of the Republicans has already asked members of his party, ease up on the heckling and so forth during the president's speech. Let's not appear to be, he didn't use the terms that childish or even that rude, but that's kind of what it comes down to. Show some decorum, but there'll probably be a few points where Biden just goes over the top or where they just cannot constrain themselves. I mean, if I were to stand in front of your face or address you and a bunch of people at a meeting and I'd say, Joe Biden's the best president we've ever had, I know, my God. Not only would I be heckled, I'd probably be tarred and feathered and ran out of town on a rail, correct? So I would understand. Here we are, just ahead of the president's speech coming up. March 7, 2024. Normally it would be given on a Tuesday, but last Tuesday, of course, was at that point was the super election, Super Tuesday voting, so he had to move it to the 4th. And, of course, there were those in the House that were saying, look, the president comes at our invitation, members of the House. We control the House. Let's just don't invite him. Well, you can talk about it, but still put him up there and let him try to blah, blah, blah his way out of it and see how he holds up. He's going to get astounding support from all the Democrats. You know that. And we also know there'll be those in the crowd on the other side that'll be calling out for him. We're going to break a lot of it down for you. We have a lot to cover on some of the things we're seeing already in advance of the speech. Here we are, March 7, 2024. You're listening to the second hour of Larry Connors USA. We're here for you every Monday through Friday evening from 6 to 8 p.m. and reminding you when on the air we are streaming video at Larry Connors USA, Rumble, Facebook, Twitter, News Talk STL, Facebook, Rumble, Twitter, and YouTube. And if you miss anything, they are put up both as an audio and video podcast at LarryConnersUSA.com or Larry Connors USA Facebook. So you won't miss anything. And when you do listen at your appointed time that works for you, please push the button share and send it on to some other folks that might not have heard it. We need everybody on board for this one. It's going to be choppy waters from here through into November and probably afterwards as well. But you were listening then in the beginning to the editor-in-chief for the Hill publication, which covers politics on Capitol Hill. It leans mostly to the left, but what he was talking about there is just, this is Biden's speech for his life. This is only the third one he's given to joint houses of Congress. The first one, of course, we had COVID in effect, so they couldn't do it the way they normally would. And the last one he did give ran a little over an hour. That's about normal length. Sometimes they're under. Figure he's going to do an hour if he has the fortitude to stand up there and do it. But what will he say? That's the key. And again, back to the view of that, and I said John Cusack, I meant Bill Cusack. He's the editor-in-chief for The Hill, and he says he's going to have to do more than just blah, blah, blah.
I think he's going to need a good night, but he's going to need follow through on that. We just ran a story of how Democrats are hitting the panic button because they're seeing the polls. I mean, Joe Biden is losing in many battleground states, including Michigan, which I think is a must win for the president, a state he won in 2020. So I think he's going to have to follow it up with, a bit of a PR blitz, which we usually see. But this president hasn't been media accessible, and that's going to have to be a challenge for this White House. Obviously, the president does make gaffes like other politicians from time to time, but he's got to be out there. And former President Donald Trump is out there. He's getting a lot of free media. He's dominated this week, had a great week with his Super Tuesday wins. It's going to be interesting to see if Biden addresses the former president, even maybe not directly, but indirectly. Remember that Biden said that he predicted that after he won in 2020, the Trump fever would break. Well, that prediction wasn't true.
No, it wasn't. And when Cusack talks about how tough it's going to be for him in Michigan, which is a battleground, a key state, keep in mind that there were 100,000 uncommitted votes for him in Minnesota. And so he still wins because he had no candidate against him in the primary. He got 600+ thousand. But with 100,000 voting uncommitted, and since it's going to be Trump against him, will they even bother going to the polls? Which is a good time for me to remind you, please hear me clearly here. Even if you think Trump is going to win by a landslide, I mean, look what he did to Nikki Haley in the primaries. Wiped her out early. But even if you think that's going to happen with Biden, don't sit home and count on someone else to put the votes in that are needed. You need to be there, and you need to be casting your vote. Now, if you don't want to vote for Trump, that's your prerogative. You vote for whoever you want. If you want to write Larry Connors in, that would be a stupid waste of your vote. I would not do that. But if you want to switch and vote for Biden, if that's really what you want, I mean, what you got around you is better than it was when Trump was in the White House? Really? Is it? I don't think so. In fact, before this hour is out, I want to take you to the city of New York. And as I mentioned in the last hour, Governor Hochul might have given the true State of the Union address earlier today from the governor of New York. You'll hear why in a moment. We have seen that Republican lawmakers will be using Biden's fourth State of the Union to bring awareness to the plight of the angel families, those who have been victimized or lost loved ones to crimes committed by illegal aliens. Obviously, one of the most recent and the most highlighted would be 22-year-old Laken Hope Riley, who was murdered in Athens, Georgia. Athens, Georgia, is a sanctuary city with a Democrat mayor, and they want to make that a sanctuary city. The man who is charged with killing her entered our nation illegally in El Paso back in 2022. They took his name, some information, and then basically gave him probation, parole-type papers. You're free to roam about the country. Don't get in any more trouble. You've already broken our federal law by illegally entering our country, but we're going to let that fly and go by because this administration is turning a blind eye to that part of the law. So then he goes to New York. And he gets arrested again for endangering a child. And the New York City police, rather than hold him, because they're a sanctuary city, rather than hold him for ICE to come pick him up, Immigration Customs Enforcement, they let him go. So he ends up down in Athens, Georgia. And he is the one now charged with killing Laken Hope Riley. I caution you, as much as I want to jump on the train and say he's the guy, I don't know. The police are charging him. They say he is. And if that's true, he should not have been in the country. So that is going to be an issue tonight. But what about the president? What is the president going to do or say? Peter Ducey of Fox News asked that of Karine Jean-Pierre.
Yeah. Will President Biden publicly address Laken Riley's murder, allegedly at the hands of an illegal immigrant who was released by law enforcement multiple times on Thursday night? I know he's got a statement, but what about at the State of the Union?
Look, I do want, this is such a tragic story and obviously situation. This is someone's life that was lost, so I do want to always acknowledge and extend our deepest condolences to her family and to her friends and the people who loved her. And so want to always be sure to say that, and because it's so tragic. Look, I don't have anything to share about the president's speech as it relates to that particular question that you have.
I can't fault what KJP said. I mean, I think she said it in a very sensitive way, and she doesn't probably know anyway if that's in the speech or not. The speech is probably being worked on even up to the last few minutes. But they better get it right in the teleprompter because Biden's going to be relying on that teleprompter. But reference Laken Riley. Normally, if you have a high-profile case or something like that, the president will invite the family of that victim to sit with his wife, or at least in a special section, so he can call them out. Well, with the First Lady will be a woman who had to leave a state to get an abortion elsewhere. They're going to make a big deal out of that because apparently the baby was not going to be born perfectly. I don't have all the details. I consider every life important, but that's between a real decision between a mother and going forward. I would still disagree with it, but they're going to use that to highlight the abortion issue. And to the extent of Laken Riley's parents, a Georgia Congressman, Mike Collins, represents the district that includes Athens, where she was killed, Laken Riley. And he said he did ask her parents if they would like to sit with him during the State of the Union address. And they thanked him, but they deferred, saying, we're still grieving the loss of our daughter. We don't want to be in the spotlight. Now, that's understandable. So he made the offer to them. He also is the one who authored the act called the Laken Riley Act. It basically would require Immigration and Customs to issue detainers on illegal immigrants charged with any theft or any burglary. He said if you start it that way, then it doesn't move to the next level. The Laken Riley Act. Texas Congressman Chip Roy says, I like the idea of the act, but there are so many other names that could have been on it long before we got to Laken Riley. Texas Congressman Chip Roy.
Current law requires parole to be on a case-by-case basis. Is that what you understand?
That's what the law says.
And yet this administration is using parole to mass release people into the United States, resulting in the death of an American citizen, at least this one, Laken Riley, in Georgia. Is that what you understand?
This is the most recent one, yes.
Could this bill also have been named, for example, after any number of other individuals, particularly, for example, the 2-year-old who was killed here in Montgomery County, Maryland, who was also killed by somebody who was released on mass parole from an individual from Venezuela?
It could have.
Or perhaps the individual who was raped in Louisiana, a minor who was raped in Louisiana by somebody who was released, a Honduran?
Yes, sir.
Or perhaps we could go back in time. How about Kayla Hamilton, a 20-year-old with autism in Aberdeen, Maryland, with her boyfriend, a 17-year-old illegal alien from El Salvador who appeared at the border in March 2022, an unaccompanied alien minor, and was released into the country to a sponsor. The suspect lived near Kayla, where he would later rape her and beat her to death in her home in July of 2022, less than 2 years ago. A young woman with autism. Authorities later found out that the assailant was a documented MS-13 gang member from El Salvador who was arrested in 2020 for associating with the gang. Does that seem to be a situation in which our border is secure? Is that somebody that maybe perhaps should not have been released into the United States?
Tragically, that's correct.
Every name he went through could have had an act passed in honor of them, and maybe if it had, maybe we wouldn't have the Laken Riley case. And, of course, if Biden would shut the border. But Texas Congressman Chip Roy, as he's going through some of these cases, he reaches one where you can hear in his voice he's having a tough time getting the words out.
Elizabeth Medina, a 16-year-old high school student who was a part of the cheerleading team, was found dead in her bathtub in Edna, Texas, by her mother. Her mother found her 16-year-old daughter dead in a bathtub in their home. She was supposed to perform in a local Christmas parade with her cheer squad, but never showed up where her mother went looking for her. Can you imagine?
No, I can't.
The suspect, Rafael Romero, was charged with Elizabeth's murder, a 23-year-old illegal alien who was overstaying his visa for the past 5 years. Another person in the United States unlawfully, because of this administration's and the previous Democratic administration's failures to enforce the law.
And that is a fact that can't be denied. They've failed to enforce it. The issue coming up, as we all are focused on the general election, is obviously the presidency, the White House. But MSNBC Lawrence O'Donnell states what I've told you repeatedly.
Obviously, there is nothing more important this year for the Democrats and democracy itself than winning the presidency. The next best thing, the next most important thing is the United States Senate. I, for one, don't believe Donald Trump is going to win the presidential election, but if you're one of the millions who is worried that he will, you should find ways to help elect Democrats to the United States Senate. The United States Senate should be campaign objective number 2, because if Democrats control the United States Senate, they can stop every single thing that Donald Trump tries to do legislatively.
I've driven that point home numerous times, and there I'm allowing a liberal to make the same point for you. We need to win the White House. We need to control the House of Congress, which we have currently, and gain more control so we don't have a slim majority. And we need to get control of the Senate. And here are the numbers. There are 33 U.S. Senate seats up for election. 10 of those seats are held by Republicans. They need to hold. 20 are held by Democrats. They need to be flipped. 3 held by independents who caucus with the Democrats. They need to be flipped. And everything that we've had going on in our nation over the time Joe Biden has been in office should be every reason why those senators that are up for re-election should make sure that you're choosing someone who has the ability to control what happens going forward. Because if the wrong ones get in, well, here's a warning from Lawrence O'Donnell.
They can stop every single thing, every presidential appointment Donald Trump makes that requires Senate confirmation, every one of them. So, no, with Democrats in control of the Senate, Donald Trump will not have an attorney general in charge of helping Donald Trump get away with crimes and commit more crimes. With Democrats in control of the Senate, Donald Trump will not have a Secretary of Defense who is willing to violate the law controlling the use of American troops within the United States. With Democrats in control of the Senate, Donald Trump will not be able to confirm a single federal judge who would take away your rights, not one. The Senate is more important than the House because it controls the confirmation process. And so tonight, with every other news broadcast focused almost entirely on the 2 names that will be on the top of the presidential ballot in November, this program will focus on the second most important names you will see on your ballot. Candidates for United States Senate.
And I'll be looking at that as well tomorrow for you. It's that critical. Coming up, a very mysterious case of a woman who dies in her car in a pond in a remote part of Texas, on a private ranch, actually. And she turns out to be sister-in-law to Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell. There's a mystery. Lock and load. Ready on the right.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
Question: do you know what vermiculite is? It is an insulation in the attics of hundreds of thousands of homes and public buildings. Looks like kitty litter, but often contains asbestos. Wellington Environmental is the largest company in the Midwest that can remove that hazard for you. Wellington has what is called the General, a powerful industrial vacuum that can suck vermiculite out of the attic. Hang on, there's something else you should know. Many of you might qualify for up to a $4,000 rebate. You should at least contact Wellington to see if you qualify. And here's something else. Wellington arrives at the time they give you, not sometime within 4 hours. 314-644-4930. 644-4930. WellingtonSTL.com. WellingtonSTL.com. Wellington Environmental. Your world. Cleaner, better, safer. Be well with Wellington.
Talk radio made in St. Louis.
Very excited for what you guys are doing for the St. Louis community.
For St. Louis. Relevant local talk.
Saying what we are thinking.
This is News Talk STL.
No, you guys are awesome. I love you. And it's a tremendous honor to be on the station.
News, analysis, and opinion.
Thanks for covering the local angle.
Come on, people. This is America.
We better open our eyes.
Really local, really good.
News Talk STL at 1019, 94.1 and newstalkstl.com.
Lit Cigar Lounge in Chesterfield has a special deal you don't want to miss. A bottle of Angel's Envy engraved with your name, or maybe get several with your company name. That would be a unique gift for clients. So get one or several. Check the Lit Facebook for details, or just visit Lit in Chesterfield. But don't wait and miss this opportunity. In fact, I'll see you at Lit Cigar Lounge in Chesterfield. Lit STL Facebook.
Hey, St. Louis, my name is Rob Carter. My new primetime show will explore the collaboration between corrupt media and our corrupted political system. From manipulated elections, open borders, mandated medicines, and unconstitutional lockdowns, what is going on? The Rob Carter Show. Let's talk about it on The Rob Carter Show. Join me weeknights from 8 to 10 p.m. on News Talk STL.
Rob Carter, live and local, weeknights at 8 on News Talk STL. This is News Talk STL.
Run, run, run with a railroad when their backs are turned. Run, run, run with a railroad when their backs are turned. Run, run, run with a railroad. Get out of their sight. When the engine turns, then you gotta move on, and you gotta move on at night.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Welcome back. My guest we've had on before several times, retired Colonel John Mills with the Center for Security Policy. Had served previously also as Director of Cybersecurity Policy at the DOD. Has a book out, the latest book, War Against the Deep State. First of all, Colonel Mills, glad to have you back on board.
Oh, thank you, Larry, and always an honor to be on your show.
Well, I tell you what, I took high interest in a piece you wrote that raises a little bit different question than what we normally proceed with for you. Let me set it up for the audience. We had a woman in a car drive into a pond last month, found dead shortly after midnight. She was in the car by herself. There was a report that the car had gone into the pond in this private ranch in Texas, about 40 miles from Austin. They worked feverishly for 40-plus minutes trying to get to the woman, get her out of the car, try to get her out. They still can't revive her. And she ends up being Angela Chow, who is CEO of the global shipping company founded by her father, who had close ties to the Chinese bank and other Chinese communist officials, no doubt. And her sister is married to Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. The stage is set. The question now is, they're changing from saying it was an accident to it might be much more than an accident. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Larry, this is, I don't even know where to begin. I did an article in Gateway Pundit about this. I tried to keep it as just factual as possible. But there are so many branches and sequels, and I think it's very concerning. Did we have an intentional assassination on U.S. territory? Was China involved? So Angela Chow is the CEO of Foremost Group. Now, it's a privately held thing, so we don't really know exactly what Foremost Group did. It was largely created by her father, Dr. James Chow, starting in 1964. He came from China. He was at sea during the fall of the nationalists who had to flee to Taiwan. He came to America, became an American citizen, and but is in 1964 kind of like he returned to Taiwan to help start the Foremost Shipping Company, which is the largest U.S.-owned bulk carrier. They don't do containers, but they'll carry iron ore, wheat, things like that.
It's a major conglomerate.
It is a major. It's privately held, so we don't know for sure what it is. But okay, so he's grown. God bless him. He's kind of a legend in the maritime field and did a great thing. But the question is, so Angela Chow became the CEO. His daughter became the CEO. She's the sister of Elaine Chow, wife of Senator McConnell. She was also, what's very bizarre, for a period of time, she was also on the board of the Bank of China, which started out as a nationalist bank but really became the Chinese Communist Bank after the fall of the mainland. So she was on that for a number of years. Not totally clear when she started or when she left, but she was also on the board of the Chinese Shipbuilding Corporation. Both of those entities are listed as essentially blacklisted by the U.S. government as essentially Chinese influence companies. Angela is also married to James Brere, a venture capitalist. His company is bizarre. I looked it up. I found a Department of Defense memo. He's actually blacklisted by the Department of Defense as being his personal investment group. He's an American national.
And he's blacklisted? You say he's blacklisted?
His company, his investment company is blacklisted. But this is where it gets very even weirder. It's in the article on January 18th at Davos. He gave a talk to Forbes, and I tell you what, I urge everybody to watch this interview. It was full of coded messages.
Such
making
as?
It simple. Well, I think he was trying to do everything but criticize China. I think bottom line, but he also said, I have already put an 18-month pause on investing in China because the interviewer from Forbes says, is China uninvestable? And as anybody with any brains knows at this point in time, China is uninvestable.
Right.
And anybody who's put big money over the years in China is trying to figure out, well, how do I get it out without taking a bath on this or just having it seized?
And before they nationalize it, yeah.
Oh, and also, by the way, I also cited in my story, this is a growing story, the number of American nationals being held against their will that are related to businesses that are working inside China. And they say, hey, I'm just going to go home or for a few months, or hey, I just got to go to a business meeting, and they stop them at the airport and say, no, you're not leaving China.
Well, there's several avenues, obviously, to this. It's a tangled web that we weave, obviously, here. But the initial reports claim that she was driving a Tesla. Now, there have been reports with control issues on some of the Teslas, especially if the driver is not keeping the hands on the wheel. And originally, they were looking at this was just an accident. Drove into this lake on this private farm, a private ranch. I haven't heard the name of the rancher who owns the property yet, but why it's out in the middle of 40 miles out of Austin. What's the background story? Yeah.
It's 40 miles to the west of Austin in Blanco County. I think it's Dan Johnson is the sheriff.
Yeah.
And only 12,000 population. This is a tiny county, but under Texas law, now he's declared it a criminal investigation. So when he's talked to the AG Paxton out there, they're decreeing this as a criminal investigation. Now with the Tesla, it is. I did find some reports that said it was a Tesla. Now, as far as the ranch, all we know is it was owned by an entity. And if people start to build up some wealth, they start to build LLCs and which are lawful and legal and all these things. So the property was appeared to be owned by a related part, by an entity created by James Brere, Angela's husband.
In fact, it's Johnson City, Texas, folks. Part of that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but we don't have. I don't think the name has been released yet on the. And again, once it becomes a criminal investigation in Texas, essentially, boom, that's it. You can't. The sheriff and the investigators can't release any details, and so we hope they can finish their investigation before the FBI comes in and messes everything up.
But in the beginning, the sheriff said that they were suspecting it just an accident, but then they found something that now they say they notified the Attorney General of Texas, Paxton, we have sufficient evidence to rule that it could be criminal. It could be murder.
Yeah. And the Tesla thing is very interesting. Years ago, we looked at remote access and remote operation, hacking into a vehicle. Well, back then when we were looking at it, there wasn't really a whole lot to hack into. And you might be able to through, like satellite radio. You might be able to come in, but then do what? Because you weren't necessarily connected to there was no actuators in the car where you could move the steering wheel, where you could press the accelerator or the brake. All you could do was essentially turn the lights on and off, or turn the AC on and off. Okay, okay.
Well, Colonel, have you seen the movie Leave the World Behind? In that, Tesla cars are all converging at one central point, as if they're being directed by some hacker. Now, of course, that's a fiction piece, but you can't rule out that if it's got any kind of control that it might be controlled. But we don't know that happened. We don't know that happened. I'm just raising that issue.
But there's forensics here, and I'm not in any way saying that Tesla was part of it. However, Tesla does have a large presence inside of China for both production of the vehicle parts for battery, like some of the rare earth metals for the batteries.
Right.
Also, you got to look at Tesla as an endpoint on a worldwide network, and there is a lot of server and cyber data storage controlled out of China. So, and now the car, I don't know if anybody's who's been inside of a Tesla, but you have a vast, deep cyber connection of the car. You can't even operate the car without being connected to the network, and now they're actually connected to the actuators, because there's a self-driving mode, a semi-self-driving mode, where you could there's actuators, little control capabilities where you could actually turn the steering wheel.
Let me run through a couple quick questions in our final minute and a half here. We're talking to Colonel John Mills, retired. First of all, is there an autopsy report that had been published when it was supposedly an accidental death?
To the best of my knowledge, nothing like that has been reviewed.
Okay. And has it been confirmed that she was in Tesla? Because there's been some question about that, if it were, or some other.
I cited articles that said she was at a Tesla. So,
right.
articles.
The next point I want to get to, and you raised it in an article you wrote, is the FBI involved or going to be? And if they're going to be, is that good or bad?
Well, there is a ton of forensic, because if it is in fact a Tesla, that means there is incredible network forensics that can tell a huge story on what happened here. And again, I'm not in any way implying that Elon Musk or Tesla was a malign actor in this in any way, shape, or form. I'm not saying that.
Right.
But when something like this happens, you got to essentially put a freeze on everything. You got to serve a warrant to Tesla, and Tesla has to essentially surrender all the artifacts of the network activity related to that endpoint, which was Angela Child's car. And then you could start looking through, and then if somebody was maliciously, was it an insider inside of Tesla? Was it somebody who had broken into Tesla? Did it have anything to do with it at all? But that's
right.
when you can start to see the forensics. But it sure sounds odd.
That's a good way, odd. And keep in mind, it may not even be such a Tesla or an EV of any type. But Colonel Mills, I want to thank you. And you point out there are domestic, political, China, world economy, cybersecurity, all points to this story. We will continue to watch it with you. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Larry. Honor to be on your show.
Fascinating story. Thank you very much. Coming up, the governor of New York actually gave a State of the Union address today.
You can connect with Larry on Twitter at LarryConnersUSA.
I'm always glad to have new sponsors, but I have turned some down. See, I only endorse clients if I believe in them. And I've been a spokesman for John Beal for 10 years. Through those years, listeners said they went with John Beal because they trusted me. And just recently, a woman named Mary wrote, "We got a John Beal roof based on your recommendation." Thank you, Mary, and all the others for calling John Beal. 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF.
No matter how large or small your digging project may be, no matter how urban or rural, you must always call 811 before any digging project. 811 is our national one-call number, alerting your local utility companies to come out and mark any lines they have near your dig site. So before you do this or this, make sure you do this. For digging projects big or small, make the call to 811. Brought to you by Common Ground Alliance.
Sometimes you want to do something extra special for someone. Vincent's Jewelers can help you. Maybe you want to do something for yourself. Mark a date, something you accomplished. It doesn't have to be anything really expensive, but it has to mean something now and for the future. Vincent's, locally owned, just ask for the chance to work with you, as they have with me, on Olive, just east of 270. Every day, new specials at vincentsjewelers.com or Vincent's Facebook.
The United States Deputy Sheriff's Association is a national nonprofit and the largest non-governmental provider of services to law enforcement. The USDSA assists city, county, state, and federal agencies with free safety equipment donations and officer survival training, along with cash donations to families of law enforcement officers who perished in the line of duty, a citizen awareness program, and more. For more information on United States Deputy Sheriff's Association, please visit usdeputy.org.
I have a personal story about why I trust McGuire Moving and Storage. A relative needed to escape an unhealthy relationship. Josh, Christine, and the McGuire team were understanding, even comforting. That's why I'm honored to endorse McGuire. Since 1935, McGuire's been moving and caring for families. So, moving a home, office, local, or long distance, McGuireMoving.com. McGuireMoving.com.
This is News Talk STL.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
He'll likely tout his anti-energy agenda and out-of-control government spending that has resulted in crippling inflation not seen in decades, since I was a senior in high school. He will also attempt to blame congressional Republicans for his own failure to secure our borders, which, as most Americans know, is a crisis caused by this president. In a rare recent visit to the border in Brownsville, Texas, President Biden expressed a dire need for Republicans to, quote, show a little spine and pass legislation. Some of the folks living in that border town saw straight through the visit. One resident put it best: by a stroke of the pen, he said, you could stop this. You don't need Congress. Others called the visit too little, too late. I couldn't agree more. This isn't just an important issue for the folks living along the border. In fact, this issue is the #1 issue facing the country. It's an issue in my home state, where 50 Tennessee National Guard soldiers volunteered recently to deploy to the southern border to help Border Patrol officials combat drug, crime, and human trafficking.
Those are the words of Tennessee Congressman Rose, and he's exactly right as to when Biden went down to the border, everybody's saying you're too little, too late, as usual. And he will try to bring that up, but he's going to make sure that tonight in the State of the Union address, you understand, not my fault, not my fault. It's the Republicans that created this mess. You have to be an absolute moron to understand just one simple fact. How many illegals we have in the country now compared to when Trump was in office, and how many have come across and continue streaming across, and even into the blue sanctuary cities and states where they're saying, enough, enough. Governor Hochul said the other day, we need a pause. You need a pause? How about all the border cities that were bearing the brunt of it until finally they began moving some of them to the north? And then suddenly the D.C., Chicago, New York City, they all began to realize, well, this is not exactly what we wanted. And then they're scrambling to find places for people to stay and even asking residents, will you Will you help house some illegals? Really? Now, this House, or rather the speech tonight the president will be delivering, comes as we have a government funding deadline coming up at the end of the week. They did vote in the House yesterday to pass a package of 6 government funding bills, trying to get them through both chambers before end of the week shutdown deadline. Now the Senate has to take it up, and the deadlines are Friday and then again March 22nd. It'll be done in stages if there's a shutdown. One of the things we know Biden will probably be addressing is he will talk about Gaza and talk about the humanitarian aid and how he's going to help open up a shipping port with U.S. forces, I guess, involved. It's not clear here exactly what the final plan will be, but when I look at what he's done so far, I'm looking at that he's going to basically maybe put U.S. troops in direct harm's way. We'll have to find out. Now, also in the midst of this, and I've got a lot of information flooding and hitting me right now, trying to stay on top of it in advance of his speech still to come. He may decide the issue and say we're going to limit arms to Israel if it attacks Hamas in Rafah. That's the last stronghold in Gaza. Well, Israel's not going to stop until they wipe out Hamas, and that means going into there, they're going to do it. And everything is also playing against the backdrop of March 10 is the beginning of Ramadan. And you think even the Hamas group would like to have all the fighting cease at that point, but until they are going to turn all of the hostages loose, which they still hold maybe 100 plus that are known or suspected to be alive, hopefully, they're going to continue to do whatever the hell they want and put more trouble on Israel and those in this nation crying out on behalf of them. So we'll see how much the president's going to address that and the border issue. And again, when it comes to the border issue, as we were discussing earlier in this hour, I doubt the words Laken Hope Riley will pass his lips. But if he talks at all about those who have been harmed by illegals in the country, it'll be a passing reference. Which brings me to New York State Governor Kathy Hochul today. She began her day with what I say is the true State of the Union address. Just listen.
Rattling off statistics, saying things are getting better, doesn't make you feel better. Especially when you've just heard about someone being slashed in the throat or thrown onto a subway tracks. There's a psychological impact. People worry they could be next. Anxiety takes hold. And riding the subway, which should just simply be part of your everyday life, is filled with stress and trepidation. And if you make a living as a transit worker, that is compounded exponentially, that level of stress. So I say this will not stand, not on my watch. So today, in the wake of these latest attacks, I'm unveiling a 5-point plan to rid our subways of people who commit crimes and protect all New Yorkers, whether you're a commuter or a transit worker. Point 1, I'm redeploying nearly 1,000 members of the New York State Police, MTA Police, and MTA National Guard to conduct bag checks in the city's busiest transit stations.
That's your State of the Union situation. And as she pointed out, just saying things are better is not making things better for people, and they know it. What Kathy Hochul said today, and then deciding she's going to deploy state troopers and National Guard forces to the subway system, that tells you how bad it's gotten. And yet, we're going to hear from Joe Biden tonight. Everything's good, and if there's any issue, it's all due to the Republicans and how they've handled or not handled the immigration issue. And, of course, he's going to try to put it all in the big package of the whole immigration reform. This is like you're going to build a house with all these plans laid out, but first you got to actually get some pieces to go in the house. But we don't worry about that. This is what it's going to look like. Just believe me. But I'm not going to do anything to get you any lumber, nails, or anything else. And so I'm going to blame you for not building it because I gave you the plans. But you gave us nothing to build it with. And in fact, you brought people in to burn it as soon as we build it. Now, Governor Hochul, if she can be that direct and that candid with New Yorkers, well, of course, Biden can't do that. It would fry him on the spot. But once again, back to Governor Hochul about how they're going to try to enforce violators.
I'm proposing that we amend New York state laws in this session in a matter of weeks to allow courts to ban anyone from riding the subway or taking a bus who's convicted of a violent crime against another passenger. Now, there's already a similar law in the books intended to protect personnel from the MTA. But that law has many loopholes that we've identified, and indeed, it's only been used 3 times since it was first enacted in 2020. We're going to get to the bottom of that, find out what's missing, what language is required. So basically, if you assault someone on the subways, you won't be on the subways. And a judge will now have the power to make sure that for at least 3 years, they'll have the ability to keep you off the subways.
I would think the judge has that power already by simply putting you in jail. But what's that say about bystanders or someone who tries to come to the aid of someone? Specifically, you remember U.S. Marine Daniel Perry, who put a man in a 6-minute chokehold that continued as the homeless guy was apparently trying to threaten other people. He didn't mean to choke him to death, but he's trying to restrain him. The only way to do it is try to choke him so he quit breathing long enough so they could get him down. And other passengers were thankful, but no. The city of New York turns around and charges him with a crime. Is that going to be part of your plan, Governor Hochul? Well, what I do hear from her, we got all kinds of things we're going to do, even putting cameras into the rail cars.
To recap our 5-point plan, bag checks will be conducted by over 1,000 members of the New York State Police, MTA Police, National Guard. In addition to what the city is doing, we're coordinating with the city of New York so people will see this. A bill to allow judges to ban people from using the subway, people who attack others and are convicted of a violent crime. Improve coordination between police and DAs to keep violent criminals off the subways. Cameras on and in the conductor cabins, and expanding our mental health outreach teams. Here's the message today. Anyone looking to do harm or spread fear on our subways, you will be caught. Plain and simple. There will be consequences. This has to end. New Yorkers deserve no less. And to those who are feeling anxious whenever they walk through those turnstiles, we will stop at nothing to keep you safe, you and your family members, and restore your peace of mind.
And that goes for all those who go to New York and decide to ride the subways. But she's being more forceful in enforcing the law and protecting subway riders than Joe Biden is in protecting our nation from illegals and the crime that they are committing. You talk about a disconnect. So the stage is now set. Trump against Biden. Or somebody else at the last minute in the Chicago convention. Maybe someone else will be brought in on a white horse and say, here's our savior. Either way, the editor-in-chief for the Hill publication basically says you need to get ready for a cage fight.
This is going to be a very nasty race, and we'll see if there's even a debate. Trump says he wants to debate Biden. Obviously, Trump didn't participate in any of the primary debates, and that was probably a good decision because he ended up winning big. So I do think that they're going to be trying to get in their heads over the next 8 months or so, and that's going to be, that could be tiresome for the American people. We shall see, but this is going to be, without a doubt, a very nasty mudslinging type of race.
It will be a nasty mudslinging. And I'll give you a source that says there's already a line that Joe is going to have a hard time crossing just simply walking over, much less climbing over. The source is stating this is a huge issue for him to overcome, and we know it's going to be a huge issue that's going to be pushed constantly by the other side. Anchor Joe Scarborough asking the person making that statement, well, how do you address the issue? And the response is, well, how much he gets out has to be made by him. How much has to be made by people that interact with him every day, understand the risk and the benefits. But you got to do this with him. But they're much more attuned to what he's capable of doing or not doing. The speaker is former Democrat strategist James Carville talking to Joe Scarborough about Joe Biden's age, saying you can't get past the age issue. It's still there. Even if he were successful at everything he had done, Carville says the age is something you just can't ignore. Now, granted, Trump is not as spry as he was either 4 years ago, but we've seen the demise of Joe Biden right in front of our eyes. So that will be part of the speech tonight. If it runs an hour plus, we'll see how he holds up. And the prompter better be right every step of the way. If there's any kind of glitch in that prompter, state of the comedy will be what we'll call it going forward. In the meantime, as I had mentioned in the previous hour, the forces are lining up against Trump already. I told you that the New York Times has said it will be a tragedy if Trump is elected, and they're sticking by that. And then you get Rachel Maddow and people like her saying that the only way to save America is to not get Trump back into office. Mitch McConnell, by the way, finally did endorse Donald Trump, the same man that he said was embarrassing because of the January 6th. Mitch McConnell's now on board to say, I'm with Trump. But intel agencies, and this is a piece from Politico, they're stating it's standard practice to share classified information with presidential nominees, but the decision to brief Trump if he becomes a GOP nominee is loaded with political and potentially legal risk. This is according to the writer for the Politico. And they point out a pending court case against Trump and his tense history with U.S. spy agencies complicates the decision, makes it more controversial. U.S. intel planning to brief Donald Trump on national security. Despite all this, well, it would be keeping with the tradition that dates back to 1952, but the Biden administration intends to share intel with the former president, regardless of the outcome of his trial in Florida, according to one senior intel official. Others are not so sure they should. This is the game they're going to play if Trump's elected. And let me remind you of something. If someone calls you a MAGA, you can take pride in, I am for Make America Great Again. It is not just owned by Donald Trump. It's not a franchise. It's not copyrighted by him. It is Make America Great Again. And where we stand right now, we need to change a lot of things. And that begins by a border wall, which Joe Biden will walk around and ignore tonight, except to blame the Republicans. So the presidential State of the Union address coming up. Remember our pledge, one nation under God.
You can follow Larry on Larry Connors USA Facebook. Larry Connors USA Facebook. This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.